One decree, one evil plan, one woman stood against it all. Discover the captivating true story of Queen Esther, who risked everything to save her nation from total annihilation. You won't believe what happened next. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe to Hidden Bible Stories TV, where we bring ancient faith to life every week. And if you love Bible-inspired songs for your kids or devotion time, check out our new channel, Hidden Bible Songs. The link is in the description. Now let's dive into our story. It was the 3rd year of King Xerxes' reign. The Persian Empire, the greatest kingdom of its time, stretched from India to Ethiopia, encompassing 127 provinces. King Xerxes, known for his wealth and might, desired to showcase the glory of his kingdom to his nobles, officials, and military leaders. For 180 days, feasts and celebrations marked his dominion, each event more grandiose than the last. On the final days of this magnificent display, the king invited the people of Susa, from the least to the greatest, to a banquet in the royal palace garden. Wine flowed freely, served in goblets of pure gold, each unique in its design. The air was thick with laughter and music, yet beneath the surface, there lingered the tension of a ruler who sought to command awe, even within his inner circle. Xerxes was not merely hosting a feast, he was asserting his dominance, reminding all who attended of the might of Persia and the authority he wielded.
Bring Queen Vashti to me. She must wear her royal crown and display her beauty before the nobles.
The king's command was clear. Queen Vashti, renowned for her beauty, was summoned to stand before the gathered officials as a living testament to the wealth and power of the king. But as the messengers delivered the royal command, an unexpected defiance unfolded within the palace walls.
Your Majesty, the Queen refuses your command.
The room fell silent. No one dared to meet the king's gaze as his face darkened with anger. Refusal? The queen had defied the king's authority publicly. This was not merely an act of disobedience, it was a threat to the image of absolute power Xerxes had labored to construct.
Refuses? This insolence cannot stand. The law must decide her fate.
The advisors, sensing the gravity of the moment, hurried to offer their counsel. Their response would set a precedent for the entire kingdom.
If Vashti's refusal went unpunished, women throughout the empire might rise against their husbands, eroding the very fabric of Persian society.
Or so they argued. The king, humiliated and enraged, issued a decree. Vashti was stripped of her title as queen, and her position was declared vacant. This decision sent a chilling message across the empire. Defying the king had dire consequences. Little did Xerxes know that his impulsive decree would set the stage for a far greater plan, one that would unfold through an unknown Jewish girl named Esther. The throne beside King Xerxes sat empty, a reminder of the humiliation he had suffered during Queen Vashti's defiance. Though his anger had cooled, his advisors, eager to secure the stability of the throne, proposed a plan to fill the void.
Let a search be conducted,
They said.
for the most beautiful young women in the empire. Bring them to the palace and let them be cared for and prepared with the finest treatments. From among them, the king will choose a new queen.
The idea pleased Xerxes, for it would not only resolve the matter of succession, but also reaffirm his authority across the realm. So, the decree was sent out to every province, reaching from the distant mountains of India to the sun-scorched deserts of Ethiopia. It summoned young women of beauty and grace, each vying for the favor of the most powerful man in the known world. In the city of Susa, A young Jewish woman named Hadassah, known as Esther, lived quietly under the care of her cousin Mordecai. Both were descendants of the tribe of Benjamin, living as exiles in Persia. Esther was known not only for her beauty, but also for her humble and gentle spirit. When the decree reached Susa, Esther's name was among those chosen to be presented at the palace. Mordecai, her guardian, recognized the potential dangers of this opportunity, yet he also saw the hand of providence at work.
Esther, remember this. Do not reveal your heritage or your people. Keep silent about your Jewish identity. These are dangerous times.
I will do as you say, cousin.
Esther obeyed Mordecai's instructions, as she had always done. She was taken to the royal palace, where she entered a world far different from her simple life in Susa. In the palace, the young women were placed under the care of Haggai, the custodian of the harem. Months of preparation began. They were bathed in oils and perfumes, dressed in silks, and taught the ways of the court. The finest foods of the empire were placed before them, yet not all won favor in the eyes of their caretakers. But Esther was different. Her humility and grace set her apart, and she found favor with Haggai. He provided her with the best quarters, the finest cosmetics, and 7 handmaidens to serve her. As the days turned into months, Esther gained not only beauty, but also wisdom, for she listened and observed the ways of the palace. Finally, the day came for Esther to be presented before the king. She wore no extravagant jewelry, only the simple adornments Haggai had suggested. Her confidence lay not in outward beauty, but in the inner grace that had sustained her through the months of preparation. When King Xerxes saw her, he was captivated. Among all the young women, Esther's beauty and character shone brightest. He placed the royal crown upon her head and declared her Queen of Persia. And yet, within the grandeur of her new life, Esther carried a secret. Her true identity as a Jew remained hidden, as Mordecai had instructed. Little did she know how significant that secret would become in the days ahead. Meanwhile, Mordecai continued to sit at the king's gate, ever watchful, ever faithful. Though separated by palace walls, his concern for Esther never wavered. The story was only beginning, and neither Esther nor Mordecai could foresee the challenges that lay ahead. Mordecai, though separated from Esther by the palace walls, remained vigilant. Day after day, he positioned himself at the king's gate, a place where news flowed freely and decisions affecting the empire were made. His quiet loyalty to Esther and his steadfast faith in the God of Israel guided him as he watched over her from a distance. The gates of the palace were not just a threshold. They were a hub of intrigue, ambition, and danger. Courtiers, officials, and guards passed through, exchanging whispers of royal affairs and conspiracies. Mordecai listened carefully, knowing that information was a powerful tool, especially for a man living in exile. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun cast long shadows over the city, Mordecai overheard a conversation that made his heart race. 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthana and Teresh, were plotting treachery. Their voices were low, but their words carried venom.
The king's arrogance blinds him. He rules with a heavy hand, and yet he is oblivious to our suffering.
He deserves to fall. We'll strike him down when he least expects it.
Mordecai's pulse quickened. He understood the gravity of what he had heard. The lives of kings were fraught with danger, but this was no ordinary threat. The plot, if successful, would plunge the empire into chaos. He had to act.
Go to Queen Esther at once. Tell her the king's life is in danger. These men, Bigthana and Teresh, are conspiring to assassinate him. She must warn him before it is too late.
The messenger hurried to Esther's quarters, and without hesitation, she relayed Mordecai's warning to the king. The palace erupted into swift action. The eunuchs were arrested, and their plot was uncovered. Bigthana and Teresh were tried and executed, their treachery serving as a grim reminder of the dangers within the king's own court. Mordecai's actions had saved the life of King Xerxes, and his loyalty was recorded in the royal chronicles, a testament to his bravery and integrity. Despite his life-saving deed, Mordecai received no reward or recognition. Yet he did not act for praise or favor. His faith and sense of duty drove him, not ambition. Unknown to him, this moment of loyalty, seemingly forgotten, would play a pivotal role in the unfolding of a much greater plan. For now, life returned to its routine. But in the shadows of the palace, new schemes were brewing, ones that would threaten not just the king, but an entire people. The story now shifts to a man whose name would become synonymous with hatred and pride. Haman, the son of Hammedatha, a descendant of Agag, the Amalekite king. Haman's rise to power was swift and calculated. He earned the king's favor, securing a position as the chief advisor and the most powerful man in the kingdom after Xerxes himself. With his new title came authority, and with authority came ambition. Haman was no ordinary servant of the king. His pride demanded more than respect. It demanded absolute reverence. A royal decree was issued. All the king's officials must kneel and bow before Haman as he passed, a command meant to elevate Haman above the common masses. Among the officials at the king's gate was Mordecai. Day after day, as Haman passed by in his chariot or entourage, the crowd would bow low, faces pressed to the ground. But Mordecai remained seated, unmoving, his posture defiant, and his gaze steady. Mordecai's refusal was not born out of rebellion for its own sake, but out of his faith. He would bow to no man, for such honor was reserved for God alone. This act of silent resistance ignited a fire of fury within Haman. Haman's officials, puzzled by Mordecai's actions, reported the matter to Haman, hoping to see if this defiance would be tolerated. Haman's anger burned as brightly as the sun over Susa. The offense was too great to ignore, but for a man like Haman, one Jew's defiance was not punishment enough. Haman's pride demanded a greater vengeance.
A single man defies me, and yet he is not alone. They are all alike, this Mordecai and his people. I will not rest until every Jew in the empire is destroyed.
Fueled by his hatred, Haman devised a plan to annihilate the entire Jewish population within the empire. This was not merely an act of revenge. It was an attempt to erase the name and memory of the Jewish people forever. Haman approached King Xerxes with cunning words, masking his hatred with flattery and false concern for the stability of the empire.
Your Majesty, there is a certain people scattered across your provinces. Their customs are different from all others. They do not obey your laws, and their presence threatens the peace of your kingdom. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will personally contribute 10,000 talents of silver to the royal treasury to fund this endeavor.
The king, trusting his advisor and blinded by Haman's deceit, handed over his royal signet ring, granting Haman the authority to carry out his plan. A decree was written and sent to every province, sealed with the king's ring, instructing officials to destroy, kill, and annihilate all Jews, young and old, men, women, and children, on the 13th day of the 12th month. As the decree spread through the provinces, panic and despair gripped the Jewish community. In the streets of Susa, the scrolls of death were read aloud, their words echoing like thunder. Families clung to one another, tears streaming down their faces as they realized the gravity of what lay ahead. Yet while mourning, Mordecai's resolve only grew stronger. Meanwhile, Haman reveled in his victory, oblivious to the unseen hand that was already at work. He believed his plan was foolproof, his revenge inevitable. But the God of Israel, though silent, was not absent. Even as darkness threatened to consume the Jews, the first threads of their deliverance were being woven. The streets of Susa were heavy with grief. From the moment Haman's decree was announced, the Jewish community was plunged into mourning. Families tore their garments, covered themselves in ashes, and wept openly in the marketplaces and temple courtyards. But one voice rose above the rest, a voice of anguish, a voice of defiance. Mordecai, faithful and steadfast, stood at the king's gate. He cried out to the God of Israel, lamenting the impending destruction of his people. Inside the palace, Esther was shielded from the cries of the streets. The grandeur of the royal courts offered comfort, but it also created a barrier between her and the struggles of her people. She had no knowledge of the decree or the despair that gripped the city until her maidservants brought news of Mordecai's public mourning.
What has happened? Why is my cousin in sackcloth? Send him clothing at once. He cannot sit at the king's gate in mourning.
But when Mordecai received the garments, he refused them. He sent word to Esther, urging her to learn the truth of what had transpired. Esther, now deeply troubled, sent her servant Hathach to speak with Mordecai and uncover the cause of his sorrow. At the gate, Mordecai revealed the full weight of Haman's decree to Hathach. He spoke of the impending slaughter and handed him a copy of the edict to show Esther.
Tell the queen she must go to the king and plead for the lives of her people. Let her know that the fate of the Jews now rests in her hands.
Hathach returned to Esther with the message, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her secret identity. She was not just a queen, but a Jewess, one of the people Haman sought to destroy. Alone in her chambers, Esther wrestled with her thoughts. The law of the Persians was absolute. No one could approach the king uninvited, even the queen, unless he extended his golden scepter. To do so without permission was to risk death. For 30 days, the king had not summoned her, a silence that deepened her fear.
Tell Mordecai this. All the king's officials know the law. If anyone approaches the king without being summoned, they will be put to death, unless he extends the golden scepter. And I have not been called to him for 30 days.
Hathach carried Esther's words back to Mordecai. But Mordecai's response was resolute, filled with both wisdom and urgency. Mordecai's faith burned brightly, undimmed by fear. He understood the cost of inaction and the possibility that Esther was uniquely positioned for this moment in history.
Tell Esther this. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. If you remain silent, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?
These words struck like a thunderclap when they reached Esther. For days, she had lived in the comfort of the palace, protected from the struggles of her people. But now, she realized that her position was not by chance. She was chosen for this moment. Her crown was a divine appointment, not a mere ornament. Esther's fear did not vanish, but courage began to take root. She understood the risk. To approach the king without being summoned meant she could lose her life. Yet the fate of her people outweighed her own safety.
Go. Gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My attendants and I will do the same. After that, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish.
For 3 days, Esther and the Jewish people of Susa fasted and prayed, seeking divine intervention. The weight of Esther's decision pressed heavily on her, yet with each passing moment, her resolve grew stronger. She would act, not because it was safe, but because it was right. In the silence of the palace and the prayers of her people, Esther prepared for the most dangerous moment of her life. The morning sunlight poured into the throne room, gilding the grand pillars and casting long shadows across the marble floor. At its center sat King Xerxes, regal and commanding, the golden scepter in his hand, a symbol of life or death. Esther, draped in royal robes that shimmered with every step, walked steadily toward him. Yet within her, fear wrestled with faith. For 3 days, she had fasted and prayed, seeking the strength to face this moment. Every step she took was an act of defiance against the law and a testament to her courage. Before her stood the king, her husband, yes, but also the most powerful man in the world, a ruler who could end her life with a single word.
Who dares approach unbidden?
The murmurs of courtiers filled the air as all eyes turned to Esther. Silence fell as she paused at the threshold. The weight of countless prayers bore her forward, and though her hands trembled, she stood tall. Then, in an act of grace, Xerxes extended the golden scepter, a sign of favor and life.
What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you.
Esther's heart raced. The words of her people's plight pressed against her lips, but wisdom tempered her urgency. She understood the weight of timing, the importance of building trust and intrigue. Instead of speaking of the decree, she made a simple yet unexpected request.
If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him.
Xerxes, intrigued by the invitation, nodded his agreement. Haman, proud and self-satisfied, relished the honor of dining with the king and queen alone. He saw it as confirmation of his power, unaware that this invitation was the first thread unraveling his carefully woven plot. Later that day, the king and Haman arrived at Esther's chambers. The table was adorned with golden plates, jeweled goblets, and an array of the finest foods in the empire. Yet beneath the surface of luxury and politeness, the air was heavy with tension. Esther's heart beat rapidly as she served wine to the king, carefully choosing her moment.
Now, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted.
The room seemed to hold its breath. This was her moment. She could expose Haman's plot, plead for her people, and beg for their deliverance. But as Esther looked into the king's eyes, she hesitated. The timing did not feel right. Instead, she chose patience and wisdom.
My petition and my request are this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to another banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question.
Xerxes agreed, his curiosity piqued. Haman, filled with pride, left the banquet in high spirits, certain that his power and influence were secure. He saw himself not just as the king's advisor, but as an equal to the royal family. Haman's joy overflowed as he walked through the streets, his chest puffed with self-importance. But as he approached the king's gate, his good mood soured. There sat Mordecai, as defiant as ever, refusing to bow or show him respect.
How dare he? This Jew humiliates me in the sight of all.
Though Haman's fury burned within him, he restrained himself, for he believed his revenge was assured. That very night, he gathered his family and friends to boast of his wealth, his sons, and the honor of dining twice with the king and queen. Yet even as he gloated, Mordecai's defiance haunted him.
Build a gallows 75 feet high. In the morning, ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then you can go to the banquet in peace.
Haman smiled at the suggestion, his pride feeding on the thought of Mordecai's public humiliation. That night, construction of the gallows began, a towering symbol of Haman's hatred. But unknown to him, the wheels of providence were already in motion. God, who had remained silent, was orchestrating events to deliver his people. That night, while the city of Susa slumbered, the king was troubled. Sleep eluded him, his mind restless and his heart uneasy. Though he had no reason to suspect it, this was no ordinary sleepless night. The unseen hand of God was at work, orchestrating events that would change the course of history. As the hours stretched on, Xerxes rose from his bed, pacing the cool marble floors of his chamber. Unable to find rest, he summoned a servant.
Bring the chronicles of the kingdom and read them aloud. Perhaps the record of my reign will ease my mind.
The servant returned with the scrolls. He began to read, his voice steady and low. At first, the words seemed mundane, recounting ordinary affairs of the empire. But then, a passage caught the king's attention.
In the days past, Mordecai, who sat at the king's gate, uncovered a plot by Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who sought to assassinate his majesty. Mordecai's warning foiled their plans, and their treachery was punished.
Wait, what honor or recognition was given to this Mordecai for his loyalty?
None, your majesty.
The king's brow furrowed, his thoughts swirling. In the chronicles lay a story of courage and loyalty, a man who had saved his life, yet whose deed had gone unrewarded. Xerxes, a ruler who prided himself on justice and honor, felt the weight of this oversight. As dawn approached, he resolved to make amends. Even before the sun had fully risen, the king summoned his court. Among those who arrived was Haman, who had come early with his own plans. He sought permission to execute Mordecai, intending to hang him on the gallows that had been built in the dead of night. But as Haman entered the court, he found the king deep in thought, ready to issue his own command.
Haman, you are wise in the matters of the court. Tell me, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor?
Haman's heart leapt. He could not imagine anyone else the king would wish to honor more than himself. His mind raced with ideas, each one grander than the last.
For the man the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, one the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, with a royal crest placed on its head. Let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes, and let them lead the man on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor."
The king nodded, his eyes gleaming with approval.
Excellent. Go at once. Take the robe and the horse and do just as you had said, for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect a single detail.
The blood drained from Haman's face. Mordecai, the man he loathed, the one he had come to condemn, was now to be paraded through the streets in honor. Yet Haman could not refuse the king's command. His pride burned with humiliation, but he bowed and departed to carry out the order. As the people of Susa watched, astonished, Haman led Mordecai through the streets. His voice rang out with the proclamation,
"This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor."
When the procession ended, Mordecai returned to his place at the king's gate. Haman, however, hurried home, his pride in shambles. At home, Haman poured out his frustration to his wife and friends. For the first time, fear crept into his voice.
Mordecai, the Jew, he is the one the king delights to honor. If this continues, I will surely fall before him.
Even as Haman spoke, the summons for the second banquet arrived. He had no time to dwell on his humiliation. Unaware that his downfall was imminent, he gathered himself and prepared to meet the king and queen once more. The second banquet unfolded with elegance and grandeur. Queen Esther sat poised at the head of the table, her regal composure masking the storm of emotions within. Beside her sat King Xerxes, his curiosity about her petition growing with each passing moment. Opposite them was Haman, still reeling from the humiliation of leading Mordecai through the streets, yet outwardly maintaining his arrogant demeanor. The air was heavy with anticipation. This was the moment Esther had prayed and fasted for, the moment to reveal her true identity and expose the treachery of Haman. Yet, the weight of her words could alter the fate of an entire people. Esther knew that her next act required both wisdom and courage.
Now, Queen Esther, tell me your petition. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted.
The king's voice was kind, even eager, as he addressed her. Esther took a deep breath, her heart pounding. For a brief moment, the room seemed to still, and she felt the strength of the prayers that had carried her to this moment.
If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request.
The king froze, stunned by her words. Esther's tone, though gentle, was filled with urgency and truth.
Your life, your people. Who would dare to threaten you, my queen?
Esther's eyes turned to Haman.
The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman.
The room erupted into chaos. The king's face darkened with fury as he turned to Haman, who sat paralyzed by fear. Overcome with rage, King Xerxes rose from the table and stormed into the gardens. His mind raced, torn between his trust in Haman and the horrifying revelation of his treachery. Haman, sensing the inevitability of his downfall, fell to his knees before Esther, desperate to plead for his life. But his actions only sealed his fate. At that moment, the king returned from the gardens. To his horror, he saw Haman falling upon the queen in desperation, and his anger flared into fury.
Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?
The king's words were enough to sentence Haman. The guards seized him at once, and a servant stepped forward with a grim suggestion.
Your Majesty, Haman has set up a gallows 75 feet high at his residence. He intended it for Mordecai, the man who saved your life.
The irony was undeniable. The very instrument of death Haman had prepared for Mordecai would now become his own undoing. Haman was taken to the gallows, his pleas for mercy ignored. The man who sought to destroy an entire people was executed in the shadow of his own arrogance. As the sun set over Susa, the gallows stood as a grim reminder of the fate that befalls the proud and wicked. With Haman's death, his estate and possessions were handed over to Queen Esther. Mordecai was summoned to the palace, and the king entrusted him with Haman's position of authority. Esther, at last, revealed her relationship to Mordecai, and the bond between them strengthened the king's resolve to undo the evil Haman had set in motion. Though Haman was gone, his decree remained, a threat that still loomed over the Jewish people. But the God who had guided Esther to this moment would not abandon his people. Salvation was near, though the battle was not yet over. Despite Haman's execution, The original decree to annihilate the Jews remained legally binding because Persian laws, once sealed with the king's ring, were irrevocable. Esther, weeping and falling at the king's feet, bravely pleads with King Xerxes to overrule or counteract Haman's evil plan. She expresses her deep anguish at the thought of her people and family being destroyed. King Xerxes, having already punished Haman and given his estate to Esther and Mordecai, acknowledges the predicament. He confirms that a royal decree cannot be revoked. However, he offers a solution. Esther and Mordecai can write another decree in the king's name, as you see fit, and seal it with the king's signet ring. This new decree would effectively grant the Jews the means to defend themselves, without directly revoking the first one. Royal scribes are immediately summoned. Under Mordecai's guidance, a new edict is drafted. This decree grants the Jews in every province the right to assemble and protect themselves, destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force that might attack them, take the plunder of their enemies. The decree specifies that this right applies on the same day, the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, that Haman's original decree had appointed for their destruction. The new law was translated into all the languages of the empire's 127 provinces, from India to Kush. Mordecai seals the dispatches with the king's ring, and they are sent out by swift couriers riding the king's specially bred horses, ensuring the message reaches every province as quickly as possible. The decree was also issued publicly in Susa. The story of Esther is more than a tale of bravery. It is a testament to God's providence and the power of obedience. Though his name is never mentioned in the book, his presence is woven into every event. Esther's journey reminds us that we are often called for a purpose far greater than ourselves, and with courage and faith, even the most impossible circumstances can lead to triumph. If you have enjoyed this video and you want to watch more amazing Bible stories, feel free to click on the story shown to you on the screen now. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to be amongst the first to watch the next Bible story. And once again, stay blessed.